The bowl burst at Liana Blackstone's feet. Scalding goat milk leapt over her silver gown and smoked against her skin. Before pain could reach her mouth, the pale girl on the floor begged the whole hall not to blame the mistress. That was the first lie. It arrived on its knees. The feast hall of Blackstone Keep had been loud a breath earlier. Men with wolf gold in their eyes had been pounding cups on oak boards. Hounds nosed bones beneath the tables. Smoke climbed the walls and flattened under rafters blackened by generations of winter fires. Aldric Blackstone, Lord of the Iron Marches, had been telling the room how he had broken a raiding band near the Marsh Road. He made the tale clean. He made himself larger in it. He did not mention that he had been found bleeding by a stranger. Then Ella entered. She came through the doors in a gust of rain and leaf rot, wrapped in Aldric's own cloak. The garment dragged behind her like borrowed rank. She was slight, fair-haired, and so white in the torchlight that several women near the hearth crossed themselves by the Moon Mother. Her hands clutched a folded shawl made of silvergrass, the cheap kind poor girls wove by winter rushlight. She lowered herself before Liana and called her mistress in a voice soft enough to make listeners lean closer. Aldric smiled at the room, proud of his mercy. Liana smiled too, because a lord's wife learns many faces. She did not like the cloak. She did not like the slow walk. She did not like how Ella kept her shoulders curved while her eyes measured every exit. Under the coming moon, Liana's grim sight stirred faintly. Her amber eyes cooled toward silver. No glamour split open, no hidden scar flared. Nothing obvious betrayed the girl. That troubled Liana more than a flaw would have done. The goat milk came by custom. A new guest offered warmth to the lady of the hall. Ella took the bowl from a servant with both hands. Her fingers shook beautifully. She stepped once, twice, and on the third step her ankle folded in a movement too graceful to be an accident. The bowl flew. Liana rose because the heat bit through wool. The room saw her foot forward. Ella landed among shards and covered her face. "Do not blame her," she whispered. "I am clumsy. I am grateful. She has done nothing." 3 denials tied the rope. Aldric was beside Ella before the milk stopped spreading. He hauled her up as if she were a wounded pup. His gaze found the stain on Liana's gown, passed over it, and settled on the angle of her foot. Around them, benches creaked. Someone muttered that a barren wife had a bitter heart. Someone else hissed for silence too late. Liana said only that she would change her dress. She walked from the hall slowly enough that no one could call it flight. The burn on her thigh throbbed with each step. Behind her, Aldric's voice lowered into comfort. Ella's breath hitched with perfect restraint. The hall resumed in pieces, not merriment now, but the hungry quiet of people receiving a story they could carry home. In her chamber, Liana unfastened the ruined gown and washed the reddened skin with cold water. She did not weep. Tears would have made the burn important, and the burn was not the wound that mattered. She opened the cedar coffer where the blood moon fang should have rested. The hollow was empty. The necklace was more than a jewel. It held the fangs of Blackstone consorts, each one blessed under a full moon, each one a sign that the woman wearing it could command stores, guards, and household law in the Lord's absence. Aldric had taken it 3 nights earlier to show Ella the honor of the house he had brought her into. Liana had allowed it because distrust had seemed petty then. Now the velvet lining gaped like a mouth. Liana closed the coffer and stood very still. She had stepped back for 3 years, 1 inch at a time, calling each surrender peace. She had let Aldric speak over her in council. She had let him claim victories her maps had won. She had endured kitchen whispers about her empty womb while he refused even one visit to Stone Mother, the exiled herb master who could have examined him too. She had believed a marriage could survive if one person lowered her head. Ella had entered the hall and shown her the end of that road. One more step back and there would be no Liana left. Blackstone Keep sat on a basalt ridge above peat bogs and iron pits. Wolves ruled there, as they ruled most of the northern continent. Common wolves hunted, foraged, hauled, preyed, and bled. Betas captained patrols. Alphas governed halls and could press lesser blood into obedience with a growl. Above every ordinary alpha stood a rarer power, a bloodline old enough to silence other lords. In Liana's lifetime, only one alpha king lived north of the Grey Sea. Kaelin Bloodfang. She had met him before the Blackstone marriage. At the Grey Moon Hunt 3 years earlier, she had been Liana Grimmin, not yet anyone's wife. Her father's house was smaller than Blackstone, but old, clever, and stubborn about ledgers. He had raised her to read maps, loosen arrows in crosswind, judge harvest by rye scent, and hear a false promise before the wax cooled. She had shot a hawk at dusk on the 3rd day of the hunt, clean through fog, and heard one man clap behind her. Kaelin Bloodfang leaned against a birch tree, white hair loose over plain leather armor. No crown marked him. No jeweled sword announced him. Her blood knew before courtesy did. The pressure around him was immense and deliberately held back, like a winter river under ice. He praised her shot. She asked who he was. He told her. That night they spoke until the moon went pale. He asked what made land strong. She answered that a lord who could not count mouths had no business counting borders. He did not laugh. He asked her to prove it. She did, using 3 imaginary hunters, 2 smiths, a marsh acre, and a bad winter. When she finished, he looked at her as if she were not a clever ornament, but a neighboring power. You were made to rule beside someone, he said, not behind him. The northern word he used meant queen. 3 days later, her father's messenger arrived with the Blackstone contract. Iron rights, 10 years of peace. Bride price enough to feed Grimmin villages through famine. Liana had refused Kaelin because duty had already been sold in her name. He did not plead. He only said he would wait until her duty ended or her mind changed. Every autumn after that, frost-white flowers appeared on the sill of her old chamber at Grimmin Hall. No note came with them, no claim. Respect, she learned much later, can be quiet without being absent. 5 days after the milk bowl, Blackstone gathered under a thin moon for the seasonal pack assembly. The square smelled of wet stone, pine smoke, and restless wolves. Aldric placed Ella on the small carved stool reserved for the consort. He called it kindness. He said she should learn the ways of the pack. Liana stood across the fire and felt 200 people waiting to see whether she would object. She did not. Ella rose halfway through the harvest petitions and asked to offer a moon dance for gratitude. Her gown was white, too thin for the cold, and cut to make frailty look holy. Several young warriors whistled before an elder snapped at them. Aldric's attention did not move from her. Liana watched the feat. Ella danced well. That was the danger of it. She spun near the fire, dipped toward the elders, drifted away from Aldric, then curved slowly toward Liana as if pulled by music. Her eyes looked upward, her steps did not. Liana shifted her weight, ready to avoid contact, but Ella's hand shot out and caught her sleeve. The grip lasted less than a heartbeat. Enough. Ella threw herself backward. Her heel found her own hem. Her head struck the stair edge with a sound that emptied the square of breath. Blood ran at once, bright over pale skin. 2 maids screamed together that the mistress had pushed her. Liana looked at her sleeve. 4 crescent marks showed where Ella's nails had bitten through cloth. She covered them with her other hand, not from fear, but because proof revealed too early becomes meat for dogs. Aldric carried Ella away. This time he shouted. He asked whether Liana would shame him before the whole pack. He asked whether jealousy had eaten the last kindness from her. He did not ask why 2 maids had been watching from the stair before the fall. He did not ask why Ella's fingers had marked Liana's arm. Afterward, Rune, the Grimmin guard who had come with Liana when she married, inspected the square before frost melted. He found 2 sets of small footprints near the stair, placed there before the dance. One maid had stood where she could see Ella's hand. The other had stood where she could not, yet both had shouted the same accusation in the same breath. Payment had a rhythm. Ella recovered in the guest yard, or pretended to. Aldric sent broth, capons, pears, soft cheese, warmed pelts, and wine steeped with winter spice. 3 days later he found her curled in a corner, eating hard black bread with a burned hand. The pelt had been cut. The rushes were fouled. A plate sat nearly empty except for crumbs arranged like neglect. Ella tried to hide the bread. That was the performance that ruined Aldric's temper. He stormed into Liana's book room with the torn pelt in his fist. She had been checking iron tallies against charcoal orders, because the East pits had produced less than the smelters claimed. He threw the cloth across her ledger. The cut was clean. Too clean. A hunting knife had made it. Liana explained the stores. She showed seals. She named the kitchen boy who had carried the tray, the steward who had weighed the cheese, the page who had delivered the pelt. Aldric heard none of it. His pride needed a villain close enough to command. Then he said the childless marriage was her fault. The room went very quiet. Liana closed the ledger with both hands. The old wound opened, not because the insult was new, but because he had finally spoken aloud what the Kitchens had chewed for years. She remembered the herb wife telling her that her body held no obvious fault. She remembered Aldric leaving when she suggested he be examined. She remembered choosing silence afterward to spare his pride. Fed him. When he left, she opened the household accounts again, because grief could wait and numbers could not. Ella had drawn honey and white cloth beyond her allowance. Honey hid bitterness in drafts. White cloth made bandages, veils, false stains, and sympathetic evidence. Liana circled the entries with a dry quill. No accusation yet, only shape. The next gift came wrapped in gratitude. Ella brought Aldric a leather wrist guard woven with strands of hair, shed wolf fur, and pale swamp fiber. She said a wandering seer had taught her the charm. She said it would guard his life because he had saved hers. Aldric wore it before the council, pleased as a boy with a battle prize. Liana smelled the herb before she saw the weave closely. Wolfsbane flower. Not the common poison that kills fast and leaves foam at the mouth. This kind was patient. Worn against warm skin, it frayed judgment, sharpened anger, and made suspicion taste like certainty. It worked best on someone already proud. Ella had chosen well. Aldric worsened over the following days. He struck a cup from a page's hand. He rejected a correct West Road warning until Ella murmured the same idea near his shoulder. He accused an old groom of laziness for a lame horse that had been limping since spring. The keep began to tip toward Ella because frightened people often run toward the softest voice. Liana stole one loose fiber from the wrist guard after supper and folded it into linen. She did not confront Ella. A private quarrel would only become another tale of jealousy. Poison needed a witness. Fire, perhaps. A healer. A full moon. The market took up Ella's cause before the next week ended. At the fish stalls, Liana became a jealous wife. By the cooper's shed, she became a barren wolf afraid of replacement. Near the shrine, she had starved an orphan and shoved her against stone. 3 women carried the tale with the ease of people who had been paid just enough to forget shame. Each retelling made Ella frailer and Liana sharper, until strangers pitied the girl they had never met. The rumors reached Grimman Hall. Her father wrote on gray parchment sealed with the wolf of her birth house. He did not ask what had happened. He warned her to be meek, spare the family shame, and remember that a wife's honor rests in restraint. Liana read the letter twice. On the second reading, her childhood rose so clearly she could smell the archery yard mud. This was the man who had taught her to aim at moving targets. Now he begged her to stand still for arrows. She folded the letter and locked it away. That night she wrote another. Old northern runes looked like cuts in bone. Few Blackstone scribes could read them, and Kaelin had once said a secret should be narrow enough to pass through an arrow. Liana wrote without ornament. She told him she needed eyes, ears, and a hidden road for messages. She did not ask him to rescue her. She asked for tools. Rune carried the parchment inside a hollow arrow shaft to the 3rd black border stone. He ran as a wolf through peat and thorn, placed the shaft in the crack before dawn, and returned with mud frozen between his claws. 7 days later, the arrow was gone. 3 days after that, a one-eyed smith opened a forge in the market. The smith repaired hinges, shod horses, and cursed in 3 northern dialects. A fat roast meat seller traded with him at dusk. That night, a tiny horseshoe appeared on Liana's writing table. Along its inner curve ran a line of script so fine she needed candlelight and moonsight together to read it. "The wolf is inside the fold. Pull when ready." Kaelin had answered exactly as she hoped. Not with banners. Not with command. With a net. Liana placed Nora in Ella's yard next. Nora had brown hair, brown eyes, a limp from an old kitchen burn, and the gift of being overlooked by arrogant people. She entered as a washerwoman. Ella accepted her because Nora seemed harmless, and because Ella believed servants were furniture with ears too dull to matter. Within 4 days, Nora knew the locked chest, the untouched cup, the hours of false prayer, and the patch of floorboard that creaked only when lifted. Messages traveled in seams of dirty linen. A torn scrap came first, then another. Liana pieced them together on black cloth with bone tweezers. Full moon. Council. Disorder. Southgate. The mark pressed in soot-dark wax showed a claw curved like a sickle. Shadow. The Shadow Pack had coveted Blackstone iron since Aldric's grandfather broke their western mines. They had raided farms, poisoned wells, stolen pups, and lost 3 open battles. Ella's mission was clearer now. She had not come for Aldric's affection, though she used it well. She had come to make the pack doubt its consort, weaken its lord, and open the way before the full moon council. An enemy with a name can be hunted. Liana prepared bait. She made a false necklace from old hunting teeth polished with ash, dark cord, and cedar oil. From across a room it resembled the blood moon fang closely enough to tempt anyone who had never touched the real relic. On the back she brushed revealing moss from northern bogs. Dry, it had no scent. Under moonlight and flame, it would wake into a silver shadow mark. A bought maid saw it in the cedar chest while pretending to sweep. By sunset, it vanished. Liana did not search. She sat in the solar with mending on her lap and listened to the keep betray itself. One servant overfilled a basin, another avoided her eyes. A third breathed too quickly when Ella's name was spoken. By supper, the bait had gone where it needed to go. Proof began to gather. Rune brought the paid market women to the grain cellar one by one. Liana did not beat them. Fear bends truth until it becomes useless. Instead, she laid marked silver coins on the table beside tally scraps, delivery notes, and witness names. The first woman wept before the second question. The maid from the dance confessed next. A stable hand admitted carrying small packets toward the cemetery road. Each confession was written twice. One copy went into an iron box. The other traveled north beneath peppered meat. Proof kept in one place could burn. Stone Mother lived near the marsh edge in a hut that leaned under willow roots. The elders had exiled her years ago for telling a lord his fall came from drunkenness, not bad medicine. She opened Liana's packet, sniffed the purple dust, and spat into the ashes. "Wolfsbane flower," she said, "a coward's herb." The poison could not be erased in an instant, but it could be weakened and made to confess. A tear drawn under silver sight would change the herb's bite. Burn the treated weave and the flower would release a sour stink no honest charm would make. Liana asked whether the poison excused Aldric. Stone Mother looked at her with pity too hard to be gentle. "Rain can finish a rotten roof," she said, "but it does not build the rot." That answer hurt because it was clean. Liana treated the wrist guard while Aldric slept in a chair after too much drink. She touched the inner edge with a moon tear and herb wash. His temper eased over the next days, though his pride remained. Saving him from madness was not forgiveness. It was strategy, and perhaps the last mercy left from a wife he had already lost. Then Liana turned rumor back on Ella. Nora wondered aloud in the wash-house why a girl with no kin visited the abandoned burial ground every half-moon. She wondered where prayer paper came from when Ella had no coin. She wondered why black cloak mud clung to a hem after these visits. Questions are better than accusations when a crowd wants to feel clever. The market took them up. pity loosened, suspicion found teeth. Ella sensed the change. Cornered performers reach for bigger stages. On the evening of the full moon, she walked alone to the thaw lake. She believed no one followed. The northern meat seller lay in the reeds and watched her fold a dry cloak under an alder root. He saw the cord tied to reeds near the safe shelf. He counted the time she stayed in the black water. Long enough to bruise her lips, not long enough to drown. When the supper bells sounded, Ella ran dripping into the war hall. She fell before Aldric and screamed that Liana had tried to murder her. Water streamed from her hair. Her thin gown clung to her arms. Men stood so quickly, benches scraped like blades. Aldric wrapped her in his cloak and looked toward Liana's yard with a face already decided. He swore to cast Liana out before the pack. Liana heard the shout from her book room and came without hurry. One glance at Ella's wet hair, at Aldric's shaking fury, at the gathered captains, and the last pieces settled. Ella had gambled everything on spectacle. Good. Spectacle could be answered if the stage belonged to the moon. Liana invoked trial by full moon. No elder could refuse the right without insulting the old law. By night, 7 elders sat in the square wrapped in wolf pelts, each holding a carved bone staff. The whole pack gathered beyond the fire. Liana wore plain gray wool and the true blood moon fang. Ella sat wrapped in blankets, pale and shivering, still beautiful enough to trouble mercy. Liana began with the missing relic. She showed when Aldric had taken it, who had seen it leave, and where the true necklace had remained after she recovered it from the hidden cache exposed by Nora's report. Then came the confessions, the market women, the dance maid, the stable hand. Their thumb marks were dark in wax. Ella cried forgery. Liana did not raise her voice. The torn shadow letter followed. Piece by piece, the words named Council Disorder and the South Gate. The elders leaned closer. The crowd shifted. Aldric looked as if each scrap had found flesh under his ribs. Next came the wrist guard. Liana removed it from Aldric before everyone. He flinched, ashamed and angry, but he allowed it. She held the weave over flame with iron tongs. At first there was only smoke, then a sour, biting odor rolled across the square. Stone Mother, standing among the witnesses, named wolfsbane flour loud enough for the back ranks. Several wolves spat to clear the taste from their mouths. Ella screamed that Liana had planted it. Liana brought out the false chain. The revealing moss woke under moon and heat. A silver shadow mark surfaced across the back. It had been bait, Liana said, and Ella had taken it. The maid who stole it broke down at once. Her confession matched the path of the chain from cedar chest to Ella's floorboard hollow. The crowd no longer breathed as one. Some were afraid. Some were ashamed. Some were angry that shame had found them. Liana faced Ella at last. "Swear under the moon," she said. "Say you never served shadow blood. Say you did not come to break this pack from within." Ella opened her mouth. No words came. The moonlight sharpened. Her skin seemed to shrink over bone. She tried to call her wolf, perhaps hoping pain and transformation would cloud the moment. Instead, her body betrayed every false shape she had worn. One arm twisted before the other. Pale fur broke in patches. Dark shadow stripes surfaced near her spine. Her wolf form emerged stunted, mottled, unable to hold a clean line. Someone cursed. Ella's hand flashed from the blanket with a dagger. Liana shifted before the blade crossed half the distance. Silver-gray fur burst through wool. Her wolf was larger than anyone in Blackstone had imagined, high-shouldered, white-eyed, and terrible in silence. She struck Ella sideways and pinned her throat to stone without killing her. The performance ended under one silver paw. At dawn, Ella named Lord Varric's shadow, the cemetery contact, the marsh courier, and the hidden ford. She did not confess from remorse. She confessed because denial had no shelter left. Her sentence followed old wolf law for spies who opened gates from within. Liana did not watch the end. Rune did and returned with facts, not color. Aldric knelt before Liana after the square emptied. He promised council voice. He promised hunting freedom. He promised never to doubt her again. The promises might have mattered once. Now they sounded like repairs offered after the house had burned. Liana asked when he had loved her most. His silence answered. When she was quiet, when she stood half a step behind, when her mind served him without outshining him. Ella had not stolen his love. She had shown its shape. Liana tore the marriage contract beneath the fading moon. The sound cut through the square sharper than a blade leaving bone. Aldric reached for the halves. She let them fall before he touched her. Northern hooves arrived before sunrise finished. Kaelin Bloodfang came first in wolf form, vast as winter hunger, silver-white with dark bars at the neck. Even proud Blackstone alphas lowered their eyes because his blood commanded their bodies before thought. Yet he stopped outside striking distance of Liana and changed there, keeping his power leashed. He did not claim her. He offered parchment. The Northern Compact named 2 rulers, shared judgment, equal inheritance, and marriage as consent rather than conquest. Liana read every line while the square watched. Kaelin waited. A powerful man giving a woman time to think in public unsettled the room more than his wolf had. At the end, he told her the frost flowers had been his. Liana almost laughed and almost wept. 3 years of white petals on a sill. 3 years without pressure. When she placed her claw against his under the moon, the oath felt nothing like surrender. It felt like standing upright after years in a low room. She accepted. Blackstone survived the shadow attack 12 nights later because Liana sent its battle plan before leaving. Archers waited above the marsh. Northern riders sealed the road. The invaders found no easy gate, only prepared wolves and a wounded southern pack forced to obey the woman it had slandered. 3 months later, Liana stood on a new wall in the Frostlands. Below her, girls practiced spear turns beside old veterans. Widows argued inheritance before scribes. Smith daughters signed apprenticeship marks. Nothing looked like a song. That pleased her. Songs like clean endings. Real justice keeps accounts. Kaelin brought a white wolf cloak and offered it rather than draping it over her shoulders. She took it because courtesy still mattered after love. South of them, Aldric ruled smaller, humbler, and watched by elders who had learned to ask for proof. Liana did not hate him every morning. Some mornings she forgot him, which felt cleaner than revenge. In the first page of the Northern Compact, she kept one pressed frost flower. Its stem had darkened. Its petals had thinned. Under moonlight, the white returned. The days after Ella's arrival did not move in a straight line. They tightened. At breakfast, servants waited to see whether Liana would ask after the orphan. At supper, warriors watched Aldric watch Ella. In the chapel, old women left extra candles near the Moon Mother's feet and whispered that Mercy had entered the keep in a wet cloak. Liana heard enough to know the room had changed allegiance before it understood why. Aldric changed too, but not all at once. He still came to Liana's chamber some evenings with council notes under his arm. He still asked whether the east granary roof would hold. Yet his eyes drifted toward the guest yard whenever Ella coughed beyond the corridor. If Liana answered with numbers, he seemed tired. If Ella answered with gratitude, he brightened. He did not love Ella then. Liana knew that. He loved the version of himself her fear created. That truth took time to become bearable. A foolish husband might have been easier to hate. Aldric had once been generous. He had carried injured hunters home on his own back. He had given winter meat to farms that could not pay tax. Those memories stood beside his failures and refused to leave. Liana had to learn that goodness done elsewhere did not erase harm done at home. A kind lord could still make a cruel husband. Ella's weakness was never random. When she entered rooms, she chose thresholds where torchlight thinned her face. She held cups with both hands even when they were empty. She paused before speaking as if every word needed courage. Men lowered their voices around her. Women softened against their will. Children stared. Liana watched the precision behind it and wondered who had trained a girl to weaponize pity so young. The answer lay in Shadowlands. Liana did not know every detail then, but later confessions filled the shape. Ella's mother had been a side branch woman with flawed wolf blood and little protection. Shadow elders took Ella from her at 7, when the child's first moon fever failed to produce a clean wolf shape. They called her broken, then useful. Broken girls, they said, could pass where strong wolves frightened guards. Useful girls ate better. They taught her herbs before letters, bitter root for sleep, marsh bloom for fever, wolfsbane flower for temper, blue ash to pale the lips, honey to hide taste. They made her copy tears in polished bronze until she could summon them without grief. They taught her to lower her lashes when lying to men, and to meet women's eyes only long enough to stir guilt. By 12, she could make a guard apologize for catching her with stolen keys. None of that excused her. Liana would never grant that lie. Training explains the blade. It does not remove the hand holding it. Yet knowing the making of Ella kept Liana from building a simple hatred that might blind her in return. Ella was dangerous because she understood hunger, humiliation, and rank. She had been fed those things until she could feed them to others. Blackstone was ready for her because its customs had left dry straw everywhere. The consort's stool sat lower than the lord's chair. Household law depended on Aldric's favor when it should have rested on written right. Servants feared losing place more than they feared false witness. Elders preferred quiet wives because quiet wives saved them from revising old assumptions. Ella did not create those weaknesses. She walked in and lit them. Liana began rising before dawn. The keep slept in cold layers then, guards under cloaks, hounds curled near embers, kitchen boys snoring beside flour sacks. She moved through corridors with a hood over her hair and counted who woke easily. The loyal woke to footsteps. The guilty woke to names. She learned which maid flinched at Ella's door, which page carried notes without looking at seals, which groom smelled of foreign smoke. Rune disliked waiting. He was built for direct threats, broad-shouldered and scarred across one cheek from a border fight before Liana's marriage. More than once he asked whether he should drag Ella before the elders and make her answer. Liana refused. A dragged girl would become a martyr before her first question. A cornered spy might burn evidence. Worse, Aldric would defend her because the challenge would feel like a challenge to him. Nora understood patience better. She had survived kitchens where one sharp word could cost winter shoes. When Liana placed her in Ella's yard, Nora asked only whether she should fear poison or knives more. Poison, Liana said. Nora nodded and requested vinegar, spare thread, and a dull comb. The vinegar cleaned residue from cups. The thread marked laundry seams. The comb hid folded scraps beneath loosened teeth. Good espionage often looks like housekeeping. The first useful scrap came wrapped in a torn stocking. It held 3 words and half a mark. Liana did not celebrate. She pinned it under glass and waited. The second arrived 2 days later with a smear of black wax. The third carried enough of a phrase to chill the room. The fourth completed the mention of the south gate. Only then did Liana let herself breathe. Suspicion had become direction. Aldric almost found the iron box one afternoon. He entered her book room without knocking while she was sealing the dance maid's confession under wax. Liana slid a tax sheet over it and asked whether he had come about the West Road. He had come because Ella dreamed of wolves at her window and begged for extra guards. His anger had softened into concern, which somehow hurt more. He could be tender. He had simply chosen where to spend it. Liana gave him the guards. Not because Ella needed them, but because guarded doors created logs. Logs created names. Names created patterns. By the next week, 2 guards had signed that Ella received no night visitor from the courtyard, while one nervous boy admitted he had been sent away during the hour she claimed to hear scratching. Liana kept both facts. Contradictions are seeds. Given time, they split stone. The false necklace nearly failed. The maid who saw it did not steal at once. She dusted the chest, left, returned with water, left again, and spent the whole afternoon pale as curdled milk. Liana had to sit through embroidery with 3 elder wives while waiting for the bait to move. They spoke of fertility charms. One suggested boiled moon thistle. Another recommended sleeping with a silver knife under the bed. Liana thanked them until her teeth ached. At dusk, the maid took the chain. Nora saw the bulge beneath her apron when she crossed the washyard. Rune followed from the roofline in wolf shape, moving over beams and low walls without sound. The maid carried it not to Ella's room, but to the old smokehouse first. A stable hand waited there. That detail mattered. Ella used layers. If one servant broke, another might still hide the final path. Liana added the smokehouse to her map. The map grew across the underside of her desk. She drew it where no casual visitor would see. Guest yard, smokehouse, cemetery road, south gate, lake path, market forge, chapel side door, old well. Red thread marked Ella's movements. Black thread marked shadow signs. Gray marked Aldric's interventions. By the time the lake accusation came, the underside of the desk looked like a snare built by a spider with a legal education. Kalen's messages came rarely and never wasted ink. One warned that shadow riders had bought marsh ponies near the coast. Another named Varric's cousin as a handler skilled in orphan infiltration. A third contained nothing but a pressed frost flower and a small drawing of an open hand. Liana stared at that one longest. It meant he was near enough to act and far enough to let her choose. She had expected old feelings to return like summer flood. They did not. What returned was steadier and more dangerous. Memory of being heard. Memory of an argument not punished. Memory of a man who could have used blood pressure as command and chose to fold it away. In the middle of betrayal, that memory did not feel romantic. It felt like evidence that another kind of power existed. The full moon approached through bad weather. Clouds dragged low over the ridge. Wolves grew restless in their skins. Even common quarrels sharpened. A butcher accused a tanner of short weights. 2 young betas fought behind the stables over a look from Ella. Aldric settled disputes badly, rushing judgment, then regretting it, then blaming the room for pressing him. The wrist guard had weakened, but habit still carried poison where herbs left off. Liana began preparing the trial before anyone knew there would be one. She asked the Market Guild whether one of their traders could witness contracts under moon law. She invited Stone Mother into the keep under the excuse of treating winter cough. She had rune test which torches smoked less in wind. Nora memorized Ella's blanket, shoes, and hidden seams in case anything vanished before the rite. Every simple request had another root beneath it. The night Ella chose the lake, Liana was reviewing a copy of the South Gate watch rotation. 3 guards had been changed without her seal. Aldric's mark appeared on the order, but the hand guiding the change was too neat, too round, too like the torn scraps Nora had found. Liana was circling the curve of one letter when the shouting began. She did not need to be told who screamed. The sound had practiced innocence for weeks. Seeing Ella soaked and shaking still struck the body before reason could answer. Liana's first instinct was to send blankets. That angered her. Not because Mercy was wrong, but because Ella counted on Mercy arriving unexamined. Liana made herself look at the floor instead. Lake mud had splashed only along the front hem. A thrown victim would have mud on shoulder, hip, and hair. A waiter has different stains. When Aldric threatened exile, several captains looked away. One looked satisfied. Liana learned much from that face. Captain Darren had opposed her supply reforms the previous year because accurate grain counts limited private favors. If she fell, men like him would gain. Ella's lie had gathered allies who cared nothing for Ella. That widened the matter. A personal attack had become a struggle over who could rule through shadows. The trial square had to be built in haste. Boys carried benches. Old women swept wet leaves from the stones. A priest tried to place Liana and Ella opposite each other as equal disputants. Liana corrected him. One stood as accuser under office. One stood as accused under oath. The distinction mattered. He bristled until Stone Mother asked whether his ears had frozen shut. After that, he arranged the places properly. Before stepping into the square, Liana touched the true blood moonfang and thought of the women whose teeth hung there. She wondered how many had been silenced in rooms like this. How many had ruled well through husbands who took credit. How many had been called gentle because no record preserved their anger. The necklace felt less like honor then and more like unfinished testimony. She promised the dead she would not whisper. The first half of the trial was harder than the attack at the end. Evidence is not theatrical until people understand what it costs. Liana had to make the crowd remember the milk bowl without drowning them in outrage, the dance without seeming bitter, the poor room without insulting compassion, the wrist guard without sounding like a jealous wife sniffing charms. She laid each fact down with space around it. Space lets truth breathe. Ella fought with every tool she knew. She trembled during testimony. She stared at Aldric when the missing fang was named. She coughed as Stone Mother approached the fire. Once, while Nora spoke, Ella whispered that servants would say anything for a kinder mistress. Nora went white. Liana almost turned. Instead, she asked Nora who had taught her to hide messages in comb teeth. Nora answered, "Hunger." The crowd understood that better than training. Aldric's breaking was quiet. He did not collapse. He did not roar, his face emptied by degrees. When the wrist guard stank in the fire, he looked at his left wrist as if it belonged to another man. When the false chain revealed the shadow mark, he looked at Liana for the first time not as wife, rival, or inconvenience, but as the person who had been standing in danger while he guarded the knife. That look did not save him. Liana had once imagined vindication would warm her. It did not. The square grew colder with every proof. The people who had slandered her did not become friends because they were ashamed. Aldric did not become trustworthy because he finally saw. Ella did not become harmless because she was exposed. Truth was not a feast. It was a locked gate opening onto work. When Ella lunged, Liana's wolf rose from a place older than thought. Shifting under full moon can feel like being torn and remembered at once. Bone lengthened. Cloth split. Sound sharpened until she heard Aldric's breath catch, Nora's sob, Kaelin's distant riders beyond the North Road, and Ella's dagger cutting air. She struck once. Enough. Her paw pinned the spy where words had already trapped her. After the oath, before Kaelin arrived, Liana stood alone beside the dying fire. No one approached. Perhaps they feared her wolf. Perhaps they feared apology. Smoke moved around her torn gown. Her skin ached where transformation had ripped through seams. She looked at the square and knew she could not remain its consort. Even cleared, she would forever be the woman they had almost destroyed. Survival is not always a reason to stay. Ella's final judgment changed more than one household. It forced Blackstone to examine every custom that had made her work easy. Guests could no longer sit in a consort's place by a lord's whim. Store ledgers required 2 seals. Public accusations needed named witnesses before punishment. Servants who reported bribery received protection instead of lashes for admitting temptation. The elders disliked writing these rules because each line confessed a former failure. Liana sent those rules south from the Frostlands with grain, lamp oil, and salt fish after the Shadow Raid damaged 3 villages. Some northern captains asked why she helped people who had mocked her. She answered that common children had not forged Ella's lies, and justice that starves innocence becomes another vanity. The wagons carried food under armed guard. They also carried copies of the Moon trial record, plain ink on plain parchment. She refused songs at first. Bards wanted Aldric born foolish, Ella born wicked, Kaelin perfect, and Liana untouched by fear. That version was easier to sing and nearly useless. Liana ordered the schools to keep the record instead. It named her hesitation, Aldric's pride, Ella's training, the servant's poverty, the elder's delay, Nora's risk, Rune's patience, Stone Mother's craft, and Kaelin's restraint. Children complained that the record had too many dates. Their teachers told them danger also keeps dates. Nora became head of the listening office, a small chamber near the kitchens where servants could bring unsafe knowledge without kneeling first. She hated the title at first because it sounded grand enough to attract envy. Liana made the wage public, the authority written, and the protections inheritable by Nora's sister if revenge ever found her. Ella had ignored servants because they seemed powerless. Liana built a door through that old contempt. Rune asked only for leave to visit Grimman Hall. He returned with news that Liana's father had read the trial record and sent praise without apology. The letter called her prudent. It did not call her wronged. Liana burned it after copying one useful border note. Daughters may outgrow the hunger for a father's confession and still use his roads well. Her first northern council lasted from sunrise until moonrise. Farmers argued with hunters. Widows argued with cousins. 2 young women petitioned to inherit their mother's forge. A scarred beta asked whether a lord's command could be challenged during war if it endangered children. Liana answered with law, not softness. Kaelin disagreed with 1 patrol distance. She made him defend the number. He did. She changed half of it. No one died from seeing a king corrected. The next harvest tested those fine words. Rain flattened barley in 3 valleys, and Old Habit wanted strong wolves to seize extra grain from weaker farms. Liana refused. Crews were shared by need. Guards watched the smallest barns first. A lordling hid 20 sacks beneath chapel boards and blamed flood loss. Liana exposed him with mud marks, keys, and a steward's testimony. His fine paid cheated farmers, chapel poor, and road menders. Lies damaged more than their first victims. Harder cases followed. A mute potter accused a tax rider of stealing vessels. The rider smirked until Liana gave the potter clay and a board. The man shaped the thief's broken saddle charm from memory, crack, and all. After that, carved accounts, knotted cords, tally stones, and drawn maps could stand as testimony when letters or speech failed. Law began sounding less like one class of people and more like a country. Stone Mother came north before summer, complaining about mountain roads and priestly stupidity in equal measure. She trained apprentices to identify poison by scent, but also to ask who profited from a cure failing. Healing, she said, was roots, steam, suspicion, and mercy tied in a hard knot. Liana gave her rooms near the herb court. The priests objected until Stone Mother cured the High Cantor's moon fever and insulted his diet in the same hour. The rescued shadow children arrived thin and watchful. Some stole bread they were allowed to eat. Some lied from terror. Others lied because training had made truth feel like surrender. Liana did not pretend kindness could mend them quickly. She built a moon house near the western orchard with healers, old soldiers, patient cooks, and doors that locked only against outside danger. A child named Pell bit Rune hard enough to draw blood. Rune wrapped his hand and made the boy spar until rage turned into exhaustion. Pell later named a hidden shadow cache near the alder ford, not because he had been broken, but because someone had given him a future larger than obedience. Another girl, Vey, accused a cook falsely to test whether tears still ruled adults. Liana investigated, cleared the cook, corrected Vey, and fed her anyway. Vey hated that for months. Mercy with Proof left no easy story where adults were all fools. By winter, she was reading courier knots better than half the guards. Lord Varric's shadow sent envoys with white branches after his failed raid. They offered apology, trade, and a bride from a lesser branch. Liana asked whether the girl knew she had been offered. The envoys blinked. That answer ended the audience. Peace built from another woman's cage would rot before winter. Instead, the North demanded tariffs, hostages chosen by council, and the dismantling of orphan training houses. Varric refused. The next campaign lasted 22 days. Kaelin broke the shadow shield wall on the final morning, but Liana won the harder victory afterward. She took names from training yards, debt houses, and courier roles. She separated children from handlers, debtors from spies, and frightened servants from willing traitors. Men who wanted a clean purge called her slow. She told them speed is useful for arrows and dangerous for judgment. Several prisoners who would have died under rage later exposed routes that saved border villages. Aldric's letters changed unevenly. The first begged, the second apologized. The third contained numbers: grain lost, iron saved, families displaced, roads broken. Liana answered the third. Useful truth deserved response even when love did not. When Aldric tried writing to Kaelin around her authority, Kaelin returned the letters unopened with a note saying the queen held the relevant border charge. After the fourth return, Aldric learned the shape of the new world. He came north in late autumn with 12 riders and no banners. Snow had begun to silver his black hair. In the round chamber, he bowed to both seats. That small gesture did not heal anything. It made business possible. After supper, he asked to speak in the outer yard where guards could see them. Kaelin looked to Liana, not Aldric. She agreed because the choice was hers. Aldrich apologized for making her carry his fear about children. She accepted the truth of the sentence, not the man, back into her heart. Her father came the next year with an ancestral sword and a face narrowed by age. At first he spoke to Kaelin more than to her. Kaelin answered each question by turning it back to the queen. After the fourth turn, Lord Grimmen understood what it meant to be redirected toward the person he had underestimated. In the herb garden, he finally admitted that he had believed rumors because defending a married daughter would have cost him comfort. Liana told him apology was a door, not a feast. He could stand there. Walking through would take years. She hung the ancestral sword in the training yard instead of above a throne. Relics locked in halls feed vanity. Relics near bruised knuckles teach inheritance as labor. Girls and boys practiced beneath it until the old blade became less shrine than witness. When Grimman envoys objected, Mara, the salt pouch girl who had once corrected ration law, disarmed a larger boy twice under that very sword. The objection disappeared into diplomatic coughing. The frost compact spread beyond forests and iron roads. Rika Saltborn, a sea wolf chieftain, brought a dispute over ships' dowry nets and a bride who had vanished before vows. The missing woman arrived dressed as a deckhand and demanded the nets she had repaired for 6 years. Her father had tried to sell his debts through her body. Liana heard tide law, separated fair risk from ownership, and ruled that embarrassment was not injury when expectation outran consent. Rika laughed loud enough to frighten gulls. Monasteries wrote next, angered that young women were leaving arranged cloisters before final vows. Liana sent back 3 questions. Were they locked in? Were they fed for obedience? Could they leave without pursuit? No second letter came. River daughters asked about fairy shares. Smith widows asked about apprentices. A baker's wife asked whether a husband who locked the flour chest and counted every crust had harmed her, though he never struck her. Liana convened matrons, millers, and healers until household deprivation had a name in law. Kaelin sometimes stumbled inside the very equality he had offered. During a border council, he answered a captain before Liana had finished reading scout marks. The room accepted his word at once. Liana closed the map. Silence taught faster than anger. Kaelin saw the mistake, called the captain back, and asked for the queen's reading. Later he apologized without asking her to soothe him. Repair, not perfection, became the proof she trusted. Liana made errors too. One winter ration order left 2 high shepherd settlements short of salt. No lord accused her. A 12-year-old girl placed a pouch with 3 grains on the council table and said sheep die without salt. The chamber froze. Liana corrected the order before sunset and gave the child a place among junior counters in spring. A queen who cannot be corrected is only a prettier tyrant. Her silver sight grew stronger with use. Stone Mother warned that gifts overfed by power become appetites. Liana began wearing smoked glass on a chain. Before invoking moonsight, she touched it and asked whether ordinary proof had truly failed. Often it had not. Testimony, marks, ledgers, and patient questions could do work magic should not steal. Power used lazily becomes another shortcut through someone else's dignity. In the second year, children performed the trial story with wooden masks. The child playing Ella hissed from her first entrance, making evil easy. Liana stopped the play and asked them to begin again. Danger often enters pleasant, frightened, and useful, she said. If a villain looks like a villain at the door, even fools may bar it. The second performance unsettled adults because the little Ella smiled shyly and the little Aldric puffed with pride before the bowl fell. Years did not soften the first 3 blows in Liana's memory. Bowl, burn, blame. They remained like nails in black wood, yet other memories gathered around them. Nora's first official seal, Rune laughing with frost in his beard, Mara correcting a tax clerk, Pell repairing a hinge for the grain office, Kaelin losing an argument and smiling afterward. Justice was not one bright reversal. It was many ordinary proofs that the lie had failed to own the future. When old Lord Grimmen died, his final letter reached her after the funeral smoke had thinned. He wrote that he had not known how to father a daughter stronger than his fear. He did not ask forgiveness. He left her maps and a chest of her mother's letters. One unfinished page said strength in a woman is praised while useful, feared when public, and punished when inconvenient. Do not spend your life translating yourself for those committed to misunderstanding. Liana copied the page for the school archive beside the trial record. On quiet nights, she and Kaelin rode to the ridge where frost flowers grew wild. He never asked whether she regretted the road. She never asked why he had waited. Conduct had answered both questions long ago. They sat among pale blooms while northern lights trembled above black pines. The old world lay behind her like a cloak finally taken off. Cold touched her shoulders. It did not own her. Ella lived for 3 days after the moon trial. That was not mercy and not cruelty. It was law. A spy who knew roads, names, and signals had to answer before sentence closed her mouth forever. She was kept in the old root cellar beneath the West Tower, where cold seeped through stone and made lies work harder. Liana visited once, with Stone Mother, Rune, 2 elders, and a scribe whose hand shook until Nora gave him gloves. Ella looked smaller without an audience. Her hair hung dull around her face. The wounded place on her brow had scabbed dark. Even then, she tried to arrange herself in the straw as if pain made her innocent. Liana did not sit. Sitting would have made the chamber private, and nothing about Ella's harm would be allowed to become private again. The first question named Varric's shadow. Ella laughed. The second named the cemetery contact. The laugh faltered. Stone Mother placed 3 objects on the table: the burned wrist guard, the purple powder, and a strip of cloth from the lake cloak. She did not threaten torture. She explained consequences. If Ella lied under lesser oath, the answers would be tested against already captured signs. Each failed lie would remove one chance to name which children in shadow training yards could be spared execution as enemy agents. Ella stared at the old woman with hatred sharp enough to cut. That was the first time Liana saw what Ella truly feared. Not death, not pain, erasure. Shadow had taught her that usefulness was the only shield a flawed wolf could hold. If she died useless, the house that made her would spit on her memory. Liana used that knowledge without pleasure. She offered one narrow bargain: names for recorded truth, no pardon, no soft song. Only a record saying Ella Shadow had exposed handlers who would otherwise have consumed more children. Ella gave the first name after sunset. She gave the second after Stone Mother proved the lake cord came from a shadow border pack. Near midnight, she named the old woman who had trained her tears with a polished bronze plate. Her voice changed on that name. It lost performance and became young. The scribe paused. Liana ordered him to keep writing. Pity could not interrupt evidence. Not again. By dawn, the list held 27 names, 4 roads, 2 hidden caches, and a cipher based on burial prayers. Ella slept afterward with one hand clenched around straw. Liana left the cellar feeling no triumph. She had wanted justice to taste cleaner. It tasted of damp stone, old abuse, and choices too late to unmake. Outside, Aldric waited beneath the tower arch. He asked whether Ella had suffered. Liana answered that she had spoken. The shadow attack confirmed nearly every word. Scouts found riders moving through alder mist toward the south ford. Blackstone archers waited in pollarded willows. Northern wolves circled behind peat ridges. When the first shadow horn sounded, it sounded confused. They had expected a weakened hall, a raging lord, a disgraced consort, and gate guards uncertain whom to obey. Instead, they found prepared lines and signal fires answering across the marsh. Liana commanded from the ridge above the ford, not from a sheltered tent. Kaelin fought below in wolf form, breaking the left flank when shadow spearmen tried to reach the iron road. Aldric held the south gate with grim obedience to a plan written by the wife he had lost. The sight of him there gave Liana no satisfaction. His courage had never been the absent thing. Judgment had been. Courage without judgment makes a fine doorway for disaster. The battle ended before moonrise. Varric's nephew died in the reeds. 2 handlers were taken alive. One bit through his own tongue rather than answer. Stone Mother saved him anyway, cursing the waste of useful testimony. The other revealed the location of 3 orphan houses before fear broke his pride. Liana sent riders that same night. No victory feast followed. The cooks served broth, black bread, and onions to soldiers too tired to boast. At the first orphan house, the Northern Riders found 22 children sleeping in locked stalls. The youngest had no name anyone would admit. The oldest tried to stab a rescuer with a bone awl. Rune took the awl through his sleeve, lifted the boy by the collar, and carried him outside as if removing a furious bundle of laundry. Later the boy became Pell, because Nora refused to keep calling him Cub as if he were livestock. The second house burned before Riders reached it. Smoke showed against morning like a black banner. 7 children escaped through a drainage ditch. 11 did not. Liana read the report alone, then again with Kaelin, then a third time before council because grief hidden from law becomes decoration. She ordered the names of the dead carved on plain stones near the moon house. Where names were unknown, the stone read Child of the North, stolen by Shadow, remembered by law. That inscription angered families whose sons had died fighting Shadow. They asked why enemy children received stones when warriors had only ridge cairns. Liana answered by building better warrior cairns too. Justice need not ration memory. The work took a full season. Men who came to complain ended up hauling stone beside rescued children. Some did it in silence. One old veteran taught a shadow girl how to balance a load against the hip. By dusk, both were pretending not to like each other. Kaelin's council worried that Liana was turning war into housework. She told them war always becomes housework if anyone survives it. Wounds need washing, roads need clearing, widows need grain, prisoners need counting, children need names. Men who only enjoy the charge should not be trusted with the peace afterward. Kaelin sat very still during that speech. Later, he admitted his father would have mocked it. Liana asked what he thought. He said his father had won many battles and left many dirty rooms. The first northern winter after her crowning was brutal, even by Frostland memory. Snow closed the passes for 40 days. Wolves hunted elk in teams because lone pride froze quickly. Liana used the confinement to read old case scrolls stored under the council chamber. Dust clung to her sleeves. The judgments smelled of smoke and mouse nests. Some were wise. Many were careless. A wife punished for speaking against a steward. A shepherd fined because his lord disliked the angle of his bow. A daughter denied a mill, though her account saved it. She marked each scroll with colored thread, red for missing witness, blue for property taken without answer, gray for rank accepted as proof, black for bodily punishment imposed before inquiry. By candle moon, the table looked like a weaver's nightmare. Elder Maud said no one could repair 200 years of law in one winter. Liana said she was not repairing 200 years. She was preventing tomorrow's laziness from borrowing their authority. The magistrate questions came from that winter. Who is absent? Who profits? What can be touched? What can be counted? Who fears speaking? Which custom is being used as a shield? The questions were copied onto horn tablets because parchment tears in rain. Young judges complained that the tablets knocked against their knees. Liana required them anyway. A tool that annoys pride often saves justice. One spring case proved it. A miller accused his widowed sister of stealing flour. Under old habit, his voice and beard would have carried the room. The tablet forced the magistrate to ask who profited if she lost. The answer was the miller. What could be counted? Flour sacks. Who feared speaking? The mill boy, who had seen the brother alter the tally. By noon, the widow kept her share, the mill boy kept his place, and the brother lost the right to bring claims without a second mark for 1 year. News of that ruling reached Blackstone. Aldric requested a copy of the questions. He did not write to Kaelin. He wrote to Liana. She sent the tablet text with no personal note. A month later, Blackstone used it to settle a dispute between 2 iron families without bloodshed. The report came sealed by all 7 elders. Liana placed it in the archive, not because it pleased her, but because former harm turning into useful practice deserved witness too. Her marriage with Kaelin grew in the spaces between public burdens. They had no grand transformation after the oath. They had mornings with cold ink. They had tired disagreements over guard rotations. They had suppers interrupted by petitions and nights when one of them woke from old memories. Kaelin's nightmares were silent. Liana learned this when she woke to find him standing at the window, shoulders rigid, wolf shadow pressing against his skin. He told her eventually about his father. The old Bloodfang king had used command pressure the way other men used doors, pushing through every will before him. Kaelin had learned as a boy to breathe shallowly at feasts, so his own wolf would not answer. At 20, when he inherited, he swore never to make obedience feel like safety. That vow explained the care with which he held himself around weaker wolves. It also explained the loneliness that followed him like a second cloak. Liana did not heal that loneliness by loving him. Love is not a poultice one person lays over another's history. She made room for it to speak. Sometimes that meant leaving a council after an argument and walking with him along the outer wall until his wolf settled. Sometimes it meant telling him his restraint had become withdrawal and that she needed his answer, not his silence. He listened, not perfectly, honestly. Their worst quarrel began with the captured shadow boy who would become a ward. Kaelin wanted strict confinement until every route was known. Liana wanted oath questioning, then foster care if the boy had not killed. The council split hard. Kaelin said caution saved lives. Liana said fear could become Shadow's final victory if it taught them to treat every stolen child as a planted blade. The room went cold enough for breath to show. They adjourned without decision. That mattered. Aldric would have forced an answer to preserve face. Kaelin left instead and returned after sunset with a question rather than a command. What sentence would prevent another Ella? Liana answered that punishment could stop a hand, but only a future could starve the training houses. The boy was held under law, taught under guard, and watched by people named in writing. Mercy received structure. Caution received purpose. Pell did not become grateful quickly. He cursed Liana in 3 dialects, stole a belt knife, and told Nora her office was just a prettier cage. Nora agreed that it might look that way and made him scrub ink pots. He spat in one. She gave him that pot for his own lessons. Months later, when he exposed the alder cache, he did not apologize. He placed the map on Liana's table and said a fool could find it now. She thanked him as if he had spoken gracefully. Such details never entered tavern songs. The bards preferred the night Kaelin arrived, and the square bent under his blood. Liana understood why. A giant wolf under full moon is easier to remember than a boy scrubbing ink from his own sleeve. Yet kingdoms are saved by both. She allowed the songs, but she required the schools to teach the duller parts. Children who learn only climax grow into adults who miss warnings. The Western packs mocked the compact at first. Bram Hartfell called it northern softness during a boar hunt, loudly enough for 3 envoys to hear. His own daughter, Tessa, sent Liana a private tally of horse lines the next week, along with a note asking whether softness could buy 6 mountain mares at fair price. Liana invited her to the Frost capital. Bram arrived too, offended by the road, the weather, and the existence of chairs not arranged to flatter him. Tessa spoke better than her father. She named feed costs, breeding risks, hoof-rot remedies, and expected profit by season. Kaelin's cousin, who had assumed he was there to inspect a possible bride, found himself inspected as a possible buyer and did poorly. Tessa refused him before the midday meal. The trade contract she signed that evening strengthened 3 valleys and weakened Bram's complaint more effectively than any insult. Later, Bram cornered Liana near the horse pens and accused her of making daughters unmanageable. A chestnut mare chose that moment to bite his sleeve. Liana said even horses resist bad handling. Bram did not appreciate the comparison. Tessa did. Within 2 years, Hartfell daughters held 3 trade seals. Bram remained alive, irritable, and wealthier because of them, which was the sort of justice Liana found almost funny. The coastal case came after that. Rika Saltborn smelled of kelp, iron knives, and weather. She distrusted inland law but respected anyone who could keep ledgers through winter. The vanished bride Annette stood before the court with tar in her hair and rope burns across her palms. Her father called her disobedient. She answered that she had mended nets, balanced crews, and kept storm accounts while men drank away shares. Disobedience, she said, was the first honest work she had done for herself. Liana's ruling in Annette's favor brought shells, curses, and 3 excellent navigators into Northern Alliance. It also brought letters from monasteries and marriage brokers who sensed their trade weakening. One broker argued that families would fall apart if daughters could refuse. Liana answered that houses held together by locked doors were already ruins. Kaylin read that letter twice and asked whether she ever tired of making enemies. She said yes, then sealed the reply anyway. The old injury of childlessness changed shape over the years. Some still whispered when Liana passed cradles at festivals. Fewer dared. She and Kaylin spoke of heirs in practical terms before tenderness entered the matter. The compact allowed chosen succession through blood, adoption, or council oath. That law eased a knot she had carried since Blackstone. Her body was not a failed treaty. Her worth did not wait in an empty cradle. When a fever mother died leaving twin girls, the council suggested noble fosterage. Liana visited the nursery first. One twin gripped her finger with astonishing fury. The other slept through every noise except her sister's cry. Kaylin watched from the doorway with an expression he rarely wore in public. They did not adopt the twins as heirs. That would have turned grief into politics too quickly. They did become guardians of the moon house that raised them. Love can hold without owning. Years later, one of those twins climbed the council table during a grain debate and declared all adults too slow. Liana removed her from the ink pot and asked for her proposal. The child suggested feeding everyone honey cakes so arguments ended faster. Kaylin supported the motion for personal reasons. It failed. The council record included the incident because Nora's sister, now a senior scribe, believed future historians deserved evidence that solemn reforms had survived children. Liana's laughter became part of court life by then. Not constant, never careless, but present. The first time she laughed during a tax appeal, 3 elders looked relieved and 2 looked frightened. She told them a queen's amusement was not a legal precedent. That line entered informal training anyway. Young clerks repeated it whenever someone tried to read mood as law. Liana approved. Better to mock the habit than let it grow teeth. On the 5th anniversary of the trial, Blackstone sent a delegation carrying the rebuilt Blood Moon Fang. Aldric had ordered the old consort relic retired from marriage use. It would hang in the hall as a memorial to shared authority abused and restored. Liana touched the fangs one last time. The necklace no longer felt like a chain or shield. It felt like an ancestor who had finally been given honest work. She approved its retirement under witness. Mara, Aldric's later consort, stood with the delegation. She was older than Liana, broad-hipped, brown-skinned from harvest fields, and blunt enough to make Blackstone elders sweat. Her contract granted independent stores, council speech, and exit rights under oath. She thanked Liana for making refusal lawful, then admitted she had married Aldric because he had become useful and because she could leave if usefulness soured. Liana liked her at once. Aldric did not ask for old tenderness during that visit. He asked whether the new moon houses should be funded by iron tithe or winter levy. Liana said iron tithe because fever harmed production and production should fund prevention. Mara disagreed. She argued for a mixed levy so villages would treat the houses as common protection, not a lord's charity. Liana considered and changed her recommendation. Aldric watched 2 women improve his policy and managed not to look wounded. Growth sometimes has a plain face. That evening, Kaylin asked whether seeing Aldric settled hurt. Liana thought before answering. It did not hurt as possession lost. It ached like touching a scar during rain. She was glad Mara had terms. She was glad Blackstone had law. She was sad for the woman she had been, who once mistook being chosen for being valued. Kaylin took that answer without trying to sweeten it. Some grief deserves to remain accurate. The final reform of Liana's early reign concerned public apology. Too many offenders used apology as a key, expecting doors to open once the proper words were spoken. Liana required restitution plans to accompany formal remorse. What was damaged? Who carried the cost? What would change? Who could verify change after anger cooled? Priests objected that repentance belonged to the soul. Stone Mother replied that souls with full purses could still repay broken windows. Under that law, the kitchen woman who had laughed at barren insults organized winter bread for women abandoned after false accusations. The young guard who feared reporting Ella's maid trained sentries to record suspicious placement before ceremonies. The dance maid served 2 years in the listening office, not as punishment alone, but to learn how easily poor hands become tools for rich malice. Liana did not call these outcomes forgiveness. She called them repairs with witnesses. The realm remained imperfect. A northern lord still tried to hide a mistress's child from inheritance hearings. A priest still preached that obedient wives made quiet villages. A merchant still weighed salt with a hollow thumb. Each case irritated Liana less than it once might have because discovery meant the new nets were catching something. A clean court record can mean virtue. It can also mean fear. She preferred noisy correction to polished rot. One morning near the 10th winter, Liana found fresh frost flowers on her desk. Not one bundle, but two. Kalen had placed his beside an unsigned bunch from the Moonhouse children. The children's stems were uneven, roots still clinging with soil. His were cut clean. She kept both. The wild handful pleased her most that day. Respect from a king had helped her rise. Trust from children trained to distrust kindness showed the rise had built shelter for others. At the yearly moon vigil, Liana finally told the first part of the story herself. She did not begin with Kalen, the trial, or the silver wolf. She began with the bowl. She described the burn, the silence, and the terrible temptation to apologize for pain someone else had caused. Many in the crowd had heard songs. Few had heard that. A young woman near the shrine began crying without sound. Liana let the silence hold her. Then she said the lesson plainly. Do not wait until a woman proves herself innocent of another person's hunger before granting her the dignity of inquiry. Do not make weakness holy merely because it flatters strength. Do not call peace the absence of argument when truth has been locked outside. The moon may reveal a lie in one night, but people build the room that lets lies thrive. Build different rooms. After the vigil, Kalen walked with her through snow falling thick enough to soften every roof. He asked whether speaking it aloud had helped. Liana said helped was too small. It had moved the memory from a private chamber into common law. That was where old pain belonged when it could teach without ruling. He offered his arm. She took it, not because the path was difficult, but because she wanted to.